Right, I'm in your hands. At that time we were getting daily briefings from all of the agencies, so it came through the agency briefing. I can't remember exactly who the representative from police was in the room at that particular meeting, but that information came directly from the police. And look, I regret that the police person who was giving that information was obviously out of date with what had happened on the ground there. Look, as I said, I would have preferred to have more up-to-date information, but I'm absolutely confident in the advice that police are giving us now. The feedback that we've had so far is that we're not dealing with a significant increase in COVID-19 cases on the East Coast, but of course that is something that we will keep an eye on. We are concerned about some of the potential health issues associated with the clean-up. Some pretty good guidance has been issued around what people should do to keep themselves safe when they're cleaning up, so use of PPE and so on, because they are, if they're handling silt and they're handling things that have washed up, that can be hazardous. So we just ask people to make sure that they're following that guidance around protecting their health in those circumstances. In terms of the flooding or the additional evacuations overnight, there were, I think, around 15 families that ended up in an emergency evacuation space overnight. There could be more people, though, that just evacuated but stayed with friends and relatives, and we don't necessarily have a record of those. One of the challenges here is that it takes a wee while for things to dry out again, so the crews are working as hard as they can to try and clean up the mess and to try and repair the roads. But in the case of slips, for example, it can take some time before the earth dries out enough to stop moving. So that is one of the challenges that the repair crews are already having to grapple with on a day-to-day basis. Yes. I'm looking at opinion polls. I know none of you will believe me when I say that. I'm a politician, but I haven't actually spent a lot of time looking at the polls in the last couple of weeks. There's been rather a lot on the go during that time. But on the overall management of the economy, I think our track record's a really strong one. So we've got New Zealand into a position where we've got low levels of debt, so we are in a position to respond to the events that are in front of us. Even if we borrow extra to get ourselves through this period of disaster response and recovery, we're still going to end up with lower levels of debt than Australia, Canada, the UK, the US, and I think that's a good track record. We've got record low unemployment. We've seen solid economic growth despite the experiences of the global pandemic. I think that's a pretty proud track record for us. Like I said this morning, ministers, the relevant ministers to whom he reports, are having conversations with him, and we need to let that process run its course. Look, again, we need to allow that process to run its course. Yeah. Can I just take a moment to acknowledge the Muriwai community? I did go and visit them over the weekend. Clearly they are grieving. They're grieving having lost two really important members of their local community, and they're wrapping support around those families and the volunteer fire brigade, who obviously are feeling this keenly. There are a lot of people out of their homes, and I think anybody across the country can understand how traumatic that can be, to have left your home in a hurry and not be able to return. So the Muriwai community have more uncertainty ahead of them, and I just really want to acknowledge that. We need to work through a careful process with them so that we're treating them fairly and with respect, whilst also trying to get as quick a decision around the future of their community as we possibly can. There will be some who really want to return, there will be some who might not want to return, and there's still a lot of uncertainty around what the safe thing to do for that community is. We've got the geologists in there now. I was shown around the community by geologists who are doing as much work as they can, as quick as they can, to understand exactly what's going on with the land. The land is still moving. Every time there's more rain, more land comes down, and so they've just got to work through that, and they'll give us advice on what the right thing to do for that community is. Sorry, I was... Look, I wouldn't necessarily want to speculate on the individual causes. There is a bit of an international trend around this. We are seeing more polarization in our politics. To some extent, we've been behind the rest of the world in that regard, and New Zealand is kind of catching up with the rest of the world in that area, and that's a bit sad, really, because I quite liked the way we did politics previously, where generally speaking, we might have argued our case hard, but we generally we're not so competitive. I think there's an element of international culture around politics creeping in. My overall message is I respect my opponents, even if I don't agree with them. I enjoy a good debate and a good argument. My message to New Zealanders is continue to have friends who disagree with you. Because that's the way we avoid a polarised society where we do end up with things like the threats of violence towards politicians increasing. We live in a free democracy where people are free to argue with each other, and that's something that we should celebrate. Well, probably a bit less, because I get a little bit more support with that these days. But look, naturally, Prime Ministers are very reluctant to comment on security matters. And I'm not going to, really change with that pattern. Yeah, it's certainly been a bumpy start to the year, but I want to acknowledge the people whose lives have been turned upside down. Actually, yep, there are days when occasionally it might feel a little tiring, and then I go and speak to people who have lost their homes and lost everything, and it puts things into perspective. I love my job, I'm enjoying my job, I guess, and I take a lot of strength from the resilience of Kiwis and the way that we are all supporting and rallying around people who are doing it really tough at the moment. All right. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.